We are looking this morning at being adultish and being focused on the outside. You remember yesterday we saw that being adultish is having a focus on rules and trying to skirt those rules. This morning we have part 2 of being adultish. The thing is, it's actually really difficult to be childish, to be someone who trusts in God, because it means you have to face who you really are before God and before others. And that's very confronting and very difficult. Listen to the reading this morning. Jesus summons the crowd and he tells them, "Listen and understand. It's not what goes into the mouth that makes a person unclean, but it's what comes out of the mouth that makes a person unclean." This is chapter 15, and we're looking at 15 verses 10 to 20. Jesus says, what comes out of the mouth makes you unclean before God. What goes into the mouth doesn't make you unclean at all. And Jesus gives us a little lesson on physiology, just if you're not understanding, because his disciples come to him and say, you know, the Pharisees are offended by what you say. And Jesus says, don't you understand? Listen, don't you get that whatever goes into the mouth, passes into the stomach, is eliminated? Jesus tells them, you understand the basic principles of the way the body works. When you eat food in a certain way or clean your hands in a certain way, it simply just goes into your body, comes out the back end, and simply is eliminated. It's just waste. You can't get to God through any ceremony, through any cleansing process. But this is where it's really, really, really difficult to be a child, because Jesus essentially says this is who you really are. Listen to what he says. What comes out of the mouth comes out of the heart, and this is what makes a person unclean. And then he says what comes out of the heart, or what's in the heart. For the heart, or out of the heart, come evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, sexual immoralities, thefts, false testimony, slander. These are the things that make a person unclean. Now, listen to what Jesus has said. Notice he said what comes out of the heart is evil thoughts. Notice he says murders, adulteries, sexual immoralities, false testimony, untruthful speaking. Jesus is drawing back, taking us back almost to remember the Sermon on the Mount when he talked about the law. These are all things to do with the law: murder and adultery, sexual immorality, speaking truthfully, thefts, do not steal. Jesus has the law in the background, and he's saying all of this comes out of our hearts, our ability to turn away from God and not to love others either. And what's really difficult is, as an adult, we want to make justifications. And our lives often are a series of justifications of why we're not really that bad, of why there's nothing really that wrong with us. And this is why this morning it's part 2 of being an adult, which is focused on the outside. We love to focus on the outside because if we can make the bar low enough, it means we're okay. If we can look at other people and say they're not right with God, they're the ones who are on the outside, well, we can feel good about ourselves. And it's a very, very difficult thing to confront the reality of your heart, the reality of your greed and your selfishness and your desires. But Jesus says that's who you really are. That's who you really are. But being a child recognises that we have a good Heavenly Father who loves us. Even though all our desires are twisted and warped and set on ourselves, we have a Father who loved us and who sent his own Son to die for us in our place. You see, we can make justifications for our behaviour, but the more that we make justifications, the less that we recognise our sin, we also devalue God's grace and what he's done for us. Perhaps, you've had an adult or in your life or a family member who shamed you and made you feel bad for who you were, and who you've struggled to confront the reality of who you are and you don't really want to face it. Perhaps you've been shamed before by parents or by others on your selfishness and sinfulness. But the good news is we have a good Father who knows the reality of our hearts, everything that we've done. And Jesus says you can be a child with him. You can honour God with your heart, and you can actually face the reality of who you are and what you have done, because his grace is sufficient. And so by devaluing sin and by marginalising sin, justifying sin, we don't make God greater, or we just make ourselves greater. We actually make God's grace greater by recognising the depth of our sin and the wonder of his grace. And hence the gospel message, of course, is that we are more sinful than we'd ever dare admit, and yet we're more loved and valued than we'd ever dare hope. So there's no need to be adults. Let's be children and depend on him. That's it for today.